Josh has the question.
Thanks, Richard. Josh Floyd. I'm an independent strategic foresight practitioner, and I have a question for you, Ray. It's a question in two parts, but I also suspect that Dan might have something significant to contribute to it also. But just as a little bit of background to my question, my shift out of working as a mechanical engineer in the metallurgical industry back in 1999 into the futures and foresight area was in significant part influenced by reading your book, The Age of Spiritual Machines. The question is, early on when you first spoke, you referred to your view that we will at some point in the future transcend our biological limits. So the first part of my question is, I'd be interested in hearing more about the nature of that we. What is it that you see will transcend our biological limits? The second part of that question is, how much of us can we abstract away? How much of our biological embodiment as beings in an ecological context can be abstracted away before there's nothing left?
Well, our transcending our biological limits is not a new story. That's not just the future. Human life expectancy was 20,000 years ago. It was in the interest of the human species for people not to live past, say, 25, because you raised your kids already, and now you're just using up the very limited food and resources of the tribe. It was 37 in 1800. It's now pushing 80. We didn't stay in the ground. We didn't stay in the planet. We've pushed beyond our biological limits substantially already. There's a major transition now in that we're understanding biology as a set of information processes. So it has become an information technology. So whereas before it was hit or miss, now it's really subject to this law of accelerating returns I talked about, and will go in much higher gear. In my view, this is part of who I am, and not just this gadget, but the whole cloud of resources that it connects me to. I feel quite disconnected and cut off if I'm cut off from it. It's not in my body. It's pretty close to it. I had to take my bicycle to the computer when I was a student. Now it's always with me, and it definitely makes me smarter, and it makes the groups I work with smarter. I've been managing work groups for 45 years, and what used to require 200 people years can now be done with a few people in months. We are smarter and more productive with our technology. We have outsourced our memories, at least a portion of our memory, personal, historical, social memories, to our machines. It has a bearing on education, which was mentioned before, in that we should not be spending a lot of time, spoon-feeding facts to kids, because the facts they're going to carry them on their belts. We need to actually teach kids how to solve problems and how to be creative and have a passion for the projects they do and how to actually undertake projects. And so I believe in entrepreneurship in the schools. One of the trends I'll talk about on Friday is that these gadgets are getting smaller and smaller. They will ultimately be the size of blood cells if you go out some decades. We will be putting them in our bodies and brains. There are people with computers in their bodies and brains already. Every single organ is being worked on. This artificial pancreas is already being implanted. There are computers being put inside people's brains, like for Parkinson's disease, the latest generation of which allows you to download new software to the computer inside your brain. I've talked to some of these patients, and I said, hey, that computer in your brain, is that part of you? Or is that just a convenient place to put it so you won't lose it? Now, you ask different people the same question, just like on this panel, you'll get different answers, but the vast majority very jealously say, that's part of me, because it actually liberated them and gave them access to some very important abilities that they lacked before they had that implant. In my mind, the technology we create is part of our civilization. It's a very arbitrary distinction, in my view, whether it's physically inside us or not. And even when we put computers inside our brain, they will be on the cloud, and they'll be doing things outside of our bodies. And so our identity is not clearly just this physical body. Because of the law of accelerating returns, the technology portion of our civilization will grow exponentially. The biological portion won't. We can argue about the time frame. But at some point, the non-biological portion will be kind of where the action is. But in my mind, that is human. That's part of our human civilization. And a lot of it will be based on biologically inspired paradigms, to pick up on kind of a metaphor that Dan used. We're going to use biology to create some of this technology. And, but the whole point of it is to enhance who we are. And that's been the unique aspect of the human civilization. Scientists are very fond of saying there's nothing special about humans. You know, the universe doesn't revolve around the Earth. We're just a humble planet. We didn't descend from the gods. We descended from monkeys, and before that, worms. We're just another species. But there is something special. Yes, we evolved in biological evolution, but we crossed the threshold where we could actually change who we are and expand who we are. And we've done that already, and we're going to continue to do that at an exponential pace.
It's designing life, in fact.
You go, Rick.
No, I was just responding to Ray. It's actually the capability now to design life.
Well, that's one aspect of it.
What does that do to my sense of consciousness of me as a...
Well, first of all, I want to say I agree with just everything that Ray said there. And I think that the idea that the biological you is more truly you than the cultural and technological you that you've become that's an outworn idea. It's obsolete. We fill our heads with ideas. We develop technologies that we use. One of my students once said, you can't do much carpentry with your bare hands, and you can't do much thinking with your bare brain. And that's as good as a motto for me. I think that's really true. And the line, as Ray says, the line between is it a tool that's outside of me or is it part of me, that's a line that is extremely porous and changing all the time. The idea that your mind is as much outside of you, and not just in the paper and pencil and the computer, but also in the circle of friends that you rely on, in your connection. I think this is all correct, and that I also agree with Ray that in principle we can have strong AI. That is, the whole mind and consciousness can be in effect ported into cyberspace. You could just leave your protein body behind, and that would be you. That would be you taking on a sort of new embodiment. In fact, I wrote a story about that 30 years ago, a sort of famous story called Where Am I?, which had that as one of its main claims. So I agree with Ray about all that. I don't agree with him that it's coming as soon as he thinks it is. And I don't agree with him that it's likely that we're going to get the sort of super AI plus that he thinks is inevitable. I think that, in fact, that's, for some reasons that would take me a while to go into, I think that's not inevitable and probably not desirable.
Tanley, do you think it's sooner or later, based on these two
next
you know,
year?
This is... Based on your work and your experiences.
I think I've always been surprised at how fast things happen. And so I think the projection that Ray has is very, very fast. You know, it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I think it's plausible. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Just because if we can imagine this world, there's enough intelligent people that is going to continue to innovate to the point where we might get closer to it than we think. You know, certainly it's been much faster than I thought. I mean, when I first started in doing work on brain-computer interface technology and enabling people who have been disabled for so many years to try and communicate again. People said that's not going to be possible. You can't do that. I mean, sure, with an implant maybe, but with a normal computer that you would buy off the shelf and a device that you would make for a few $100s, how is that going to be possible? But it has become possible, and so I think that this is the kind of things that if we can put our mind to it and we really work towards that, we can be pleasantly surprised.
Let me make just one point about AI+, which Dan alluded to. Take Watson. A lot has been written that, this is the Jeopardy playing computer, that Watson's understanding of human language is below that of humans. I agree with that. It has a command of human language, but it's below that of humans. However, it's got a higher score than the best 2 human Jeopardy players put together. So how did that happen? Well, it was able to take whatever level of understanding it had and apply it to a vast amount of knowledge with perfect recall. I mean, you and I, Dan, you and I could read Wikipedia. It would take us years. We wouldn't remember much of what we started with when we got done. Watson was able to read that in a few weeks and remembers all of it with perfect recall. So that's one way in which AI+, we will get, in my view, to a point where its level of understanding of language is not below humans. Let's say it's equal to humans. But it can then read billions of pages and remember it all. IBM is now working with Nuance, which actually is a company I founded, to have Watson read all of medical literature, all the journal articles and all the medical blogs to be a master diagnostician. No doctor can read hundreds of thousands of articles and actually have it all at its mental fingertips. So combining this natural sort of total recall ability, which machines have already, with these human-like abilities to understand the subtleties of human language is a very powerful combination.
So at the moment, that's all based on human knowledge. And at what point, Ray, do you think the digital a machine will be able to include and transcend human knowledge?
Well, I mean, creativity, in my view, is a form of pattern recognition where we see certain patterns in one field and can apply it somewhere else and make these kinds of cross connections. And because the human brain is entirely based on pattern recognition, we're capable of doing that. We're beginning to understand those methods, and as we do, we can apply them to machines. Machines have already shown an ability to be creative in certain areas. They've solved mathematical theorems that humans haven't solved, and other scientific leaps. But you know, as that's going to be part of having a computer mastered human intelligence. It'll then be able to do human-like things, but you know, faster and with access to more knowledge than one human mind can encompass.
I think Watson is a good case to look at, because the very qualities that it has, and Ray has described them, and the utility to which Watson can be put on. I think he's right about diagnostics too. It will be a Watson-like entity that will be able to generate the off-the-wall connection between things that a human person would never think of to connect, but given its huge store, it will even automatically sift through combinations and ideas, and it may very well be a very valuable tool to use in diagnostics. I think that's right. But I think also, if you think about that, you realize that you don't want to turn Watson into a human agent. You want to keep Watson. You want to keep Watson a thing that we can put to very valuable use, and that, for instance, never gets bored.
All right, we're going to hold you right there,
competitive.
Dan. We're going to hold you right there because there's so much we need to get through tonight.